Your check is in the mail. Well, light. It occurs to me as a little nerd who used to lie on the roof of our house at night and watch the stars all by myself and dream those dreams of reality and fantasy all mixed together and not being able to tell the difference. It occurs to me that all of our light comes from stars. In the daytime, the sun is just a star. It's just up close and bright. And at night, you have as many stars as you want to count, and they all count. And they're all shining for you, because who can prove otherwise? That's the great thing about fantasy. So when it gets to be winter, and when it nears Christmas and solstice and all that, I always find myself carrying around this little book, A Child's Christmas in Wales, which is one of the most profoundly written works in the English language. And it just, I thought of it yesterday. This thing starts with Thomas inferring that he's walking around with a bag all the time. And if he needs to write something, he just reaches into the bag blindly and pulls it out and starts telling you the story. Totally random. Pretty much what I've done all my life. I didn't realize that he had picked up my habit. So in my pockets at the end of each day, I find little notes and written on all kinds of embarrassing things, napkins, Post-it notes, the back of bills I should have paid, except that I was writing instead. And these came out. I've told some of you this before. I wrote poetry from the time I was 4 years old or something, but nobody ever read it, except some really wonderful teachers. And one day I thought, I think the problem is that they call it poetry. Why don't I put it in paragraph form and see if anybody will read it? People started reading it. That was it. Thousands of stories later, that's not very profound or brilliant, and it may offend teachers of poetry and all that structure stuff and all that stuff. I can't help it. That's just who I am. My poems are turned into prose so that I can get some readers now and then. Or to quote Don Marcus, who once said that publishing a book of verse is like dropping a rose petal in the Grand Canyon and waiting for the echo. We've all had that experience. Well, some of us have had that experience. Okay, so I pulled out this piece, which appeared somewhere in the stacks of detritus that I've had for years. And this is something I wrote down. And then after that, I'll read something that someone else wrote down. And then after that, I'll recite one more thing that I've never had to write down, because the first time I ever read that poem when I was a kid, it memorized itself in my brain and I can't get it out. So it's all about light. This is about the bright star that is so bright on a summer afternoon that you can't see anything else. It's so bright you can't even believe there would be shadows anywhere. It's called Butterflu. Butterflu. The hottest hot day of the year it was, and I was just finishing the lawnmower ritual in the backyard, when you showed up just in time with a glass of iced smiles. And it was the first time I'd seen you that day, and you were a cool thought for me. Later, I slumped on the front porch to deheat and regain asthmatic breath, while you sat opposite me, your back to the light, but your bright face creasing the shadows. I looked around you and saw the old, peeled paint home next door, with the fraternity house style add-ons and the thick power lines truncating the green trees and the uneven porch surface of the 100-year-old house in which we live. And I just had to look back at you, because you looked better than anything, right or left or up or down. You were gazing at me, and I was gazing at you. And your gaze reflected my gaze, and my gaze reflected your gaze, and your gaze reflected. And then I looked away, and sure enough, the ugly old home next door had not been taken politely away, and the power line was a highway for a very old and large squirrel. And The porch had not evened itself out. And then I looked back at the chair in which you had been sitting, and you were gone. You were gone. And then, in your place, a yellow butterfly with sunlight glowing through its wings circled the chair, and then it was gone. It was gone. Sometimes light doesn't come from the stars, it comes from the words, from inside words. So this is one of my favorite poets, and I will read this to you. And this is how we shall remake the world. Like a seamstress with pins in her mouth, steady fingers coaxing thread, a hum forever in her throat, as stitch by stitch, the fabric is fitted, gathered, until what was once tattered now dances across the floor. Thank you, Irene Latham. And my other favorite female poet of all time is Sarah Teasdale. And it's one of those things that happens when you read an author, and in a moment you know that that author knows all about you. And just you are that author, and that author is you. And there's something inside you that is Siamesed together forever. And when I read this poem when I was a kid, you could see how lying on the roof watching the stars resonated. So this is Sarah Teasdale. It's called Stars. And if you want to lie on the roof and watch the stars, close your eyes and imagine those stars. Alone in the night, on a dark hill, with pines around me, spicy and still, and a heaven full of stars over my head, white and topaz, misty red, myriads with breathing hearts of fire that eons cannot vex or tire. Up the dome of heaven, like a great hill, I watch them marching, stately and still. And I know that I am honored to be witness of so much majesty. Thank you, Irene.